The Arizona desert stretched endlessly under the scorching sun, its red rocks and sandy plains offering little mercy to those who dared to call it home. In a small wooden house at the edge of Tucson territory, a woman's cries echoed through the thin walls. Maria Whitman gripped the bedsheets as another wave of pain washed over her. Her husband Thomas paced outside like a caged animal, his boots wearing a path in the dusty ground. "Almost there, Senora," whispered Rosa, the midwife who had traveled from the Mexican settlement nearby. Her weathered hands moved with practiced skill as she prepared for the arrival. "Your baby wants to see this world." Thomas stopped his pacing when he heard the first cry. His heart hammered in his chest as he waited for permission to enter. This was his first child, and after 3 long years of marriage he had dreamed of this moment countless times. Would it be a son to help him with his trading business? A daughter with Maria's beautiful dark eyes? The door creaked open, and Rosa appeared with a bundle wrapped in clean cloth. Her face carried an expression Thomas couldn't quite read. "Senator Whitman," she said quietly, "you have a daughter." Thomas reached for the baby eagerly, but Rosa hesitated for just a moment. "She is different, Senator, but she is healthy and strong." When Thomas pulled back the cloth, his world shifted. The baby's skin was pale as fresh snow, almost translucent under the lamplight. Her hair, what little there was, appeared completely white. Most startling of all were her eyes, a pale, almost colorless blue that seemed to look right through him. "What's wrong with her?" Thomas whispered, his voice barely audible. The joy he had expected to feel was replaced by something cold and uncomfortable in his stomach. "Nothing is wrong," Rosa said firmly. "She is what some call an albino child. It happens sometimes. She will need protection from the sun, but she is perfect in every other way." Maria's weak voice called from the bed, "Thomas, let me see my baby." Thomas stood frozen, staring at the child in his arms. This wasn't what he had imagined. This wasn't what he had prayed for. In a territory where survival depended on blending in and being accepted by your neighbors, how could he raise a child who looked so unusual? Rosa gently took the baby from his stiff arms and carried her to Maria. The moment the child was placed on her mother's chest, Maria's face lit up with pure love. "Myra, mi pequega angel," she whispered, stroking the baby's soft cheek. "Look at you, my little angel. You are beautiful." "Maria," Thomas said slowly, "you can see she's not normal." Maria's eyes flashed with a fire that Thomas rarely saw from his gentle wife. "She is our daughter. She is normal because she is ours." But Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. He had heard stories from other traders about children born like this. Some called it a curse. Others whispered about bad luck following such families. In a small community, where everyone knew everyone else's business, how would people react? Over the following weeks, Thomas's fears seemed to prove themselves true. When neighbors came to congratulate the new parents, their smiles would freeze when they saw little Elena. They would make the sign of the cross or mutter prayers under their breath. Some would leave quickly, making excuses about urgent business elsewhere. "People will get used to her," Maria insisted. But Thomas could see the hurt in her eyes when Mrs. Patterson from the general store crossed the street to avoid them. "She is just a baby? When they know her, they will love her like we do." Thomas wanted to believe his wife, but each day brought new challenges. Elena couldn't be outside during the bright desert days without burning terribly, even with coverings. Her pale skin seemed to attract the sun's rays like a magnet. Maria had to plan their trips to town carefully. Always in the early morning or late evening, when the sun was less harsh, the trading business that Thomas had worked so hard to build began to suffer. Customers who had been friendly before now seemed uncomfortable in his presence. Some of the Mexican families who had welcomed Maria into their community started keeping their distance. The Apache traders who occasionally came to barter looked at Elena with expressions Thomas couldn't interpret. "Maybe we should move," Thomas suggested one evening as he watched Maria rock Elena to sleep. "Maybe somewhere farther east where people don't know us." "This is our home," Maria replied firmly. "Elena was born here. We will not run away because others cannot see her beauty. But Thomas was already calculating in his mind the cost of constantly buying special clothes to protect Elena from the sun, the lost business, the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered a room. Everything felt like it was falling apart, and at the center of it all was this strange, pale child who should have been a blessing but felt more like a burden every day. When Elena was 6 months old, Maria caught a fever that wouldn't break. The same heat that threatened their daughter seemed to be consuming Maria from the inside. Thomas rode hard to bring the doctor from Tucson, but by the time they returned, Maria was barely conscious. "Take care of our angel," Maria whispered to Thomas, her hand reaching weakly toward Elena's cradle. "Promise me you will love her." "I promise," Thomas said, though the words felt heavy in his mouth. Maria died 3 days later, leaving Thomas alone with a child he didn't understand and couldn't imagine raising by himself. As he stood over his wife's grave in the small cemetery outside town, Elena crying in his arms, Thomas felt completely lost. The baby's pale skin seemed to glow in the desert sunset, and for a moment he wondered if the old-timers were right about children like her bringing misfortune. That night, as Elena cried endlessly in her cradle, Thomas sat at his kitchen table with his head in his hands. The house felt impossibly quiet without Maria's gentle humming and soft footsteps. The responsibility of caring for this unusual child stretched ahead of him like the endless desert, and he had no idea which direction to go. He looked at Elena, her colorless eyes seeming to stare directly at him even though he knew babies couldn't really see that clearly yet. "What am I supposed to do with you?" he asked the empty room. "Your mama knew how to love you, but I don't know how to be what you need." The weight of his promise to Maria pressed down on him like the desert heat, and Thomas Whitman realized that everything he thought he knew about being a father was about to be tested in ways he never could have imagined. 3 months had passed since Maria's funeral, and Thomas felt like he was drowning in quicksand. Every day brought new struggles that he never could have imagined. Elena had grown into a beautiful baby, but her needs were unlike any other child he had ever known. The Arizona sun that had once been just another part of life now felt like an enemy waiting to harm his daughter. Thomas had tried everything he could think of. He hung thick blankets over the windows to keep the house dark during the day. He bought special creams from traveling merchants who claimed they could protect delicate skin. He even attempted to sew tiny bonnets and long sleeves for Elena, though his clumsy fingers produced crooked seams that would have made Maria laugh if she had been there to see them. The loneliness was eating him alive. In the evenings, when Elena finally fell asleep, Thomas would sit in his chair and listen to the desert wind howling around the house. He found himself talking to Maria's empty chair, asking her questions that would never be answered. How was he supposed to know when Elena was hungry or tired or sick? How could he protect her from a world that seemed determined to reject her? His trading business was falling apart piece by piece. Customers who had once sought him out for fair deals and quality goods now avoided his shop. When they did come, they would glance nervously toward the back room where Elena slept, as if her presence alone might bring them bad luck. The Mexican families who had been Maria's friends still brought occasional meals, but their visits grew shorter and less frequent. "It is not because of the Niña," Rosa assured him one evening as she helped him prepare Elena's bottle. The old midwife had become his lifeline, checking on them regularly since Maria's death. "People are afraid of what they do not understand. But Elena, she is special. Mark my words, sinner." "Special how?" Thomas asked, exhaustion heavy in his voice. "Special because she can't go outside without getting burned? Special because people cross themselves when they see her?" Rosa's weathered hands moved gently as she adjusted Elena's blanket. "My grandmother used to tell stories about children born with no color in their skin. In the old days, some believed they carried messages from the spirit world. They were considered blessed, not cursed." Thomas wanted to believe Rosa's words, but the practical reality of his situation was crushing him. He had run out of the special cream for Elena's skin, and the merchant who sold it wouldn't return for another month. His food supplies were running low because he couldn't leave Elena alone long enough to make proper trading trips. Most nights he survived on beans and coffee while Elena drank the last of the goat's milk. Rosa had brought Dot. The breaking point came on a scorching Tuesday morning, when Elena developed a fever. Thomas paced the floor with her in his arms, her tiny body burning against his chest, while her pale skin seemed to glow with heat. He had no idea what to do. Maria would have known. She would have mixed herbs or sung lullabies or done something to make their daughter better. "Please," he whispered to the empty room, "I don't know how to help her." Elena's crying echoed off the walls, and Thomas realized he was crying too. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than the biggest boulder in the desert. This tiny person depended on him for everything, and he was failing her every single day. That afternoon, desperate for help, Thomas wrapped Elena in layers of cloth and made the dangerous journey to see Dr. Martinez in town. The doctor examined Elena carefully while Thomas stood by, wringing his hands. "She will be fine," Dr. Martinez assured him. "It is just a small fever. But Cedar, you look terrible. When did you last sleep? When did you last eat a proper meal?" Thomas couldn't remember. The days had blurred together into an endless cycle of worry and exhaustion. "I don't know how to do this alone," he admitted. "I love her, but I'm not enough. She needs more than I can give her." Dr. Martinez studied him carefully. "Have you considered that perhaps Elena might thrive better with someone who understands children like her? Someone who sees her differences as gifts rather than problems?" "What do you mean?" "There is a woman among the Apache people. Her name is Ayana. She is known as a healer and wise woman. I have heard stories that she has a special understanding of children who are born different. Perhaps you should speak with her." Thomas felt his heart racing. The idea of giving up Elena seemed impossible, but so did the idea of continuing to fail her every day. "I couldn't just give away my daughter." "Not give away," Dr. Martinez said gently. "Give her a chance to grow up somewhere she will be valued for who she is, not pitied for how she looks." That night, Thomas sat beside Elena's cradle watching her sleep. Her breathing was easier now, and the fever had broken, but the conversation with Dr. Martinez echoed in his mind. Was he being selfish by keeping her when he clearly couldn't provide what she needed? Or would giving her up be the most selfish thing of all? He thought about Maria's last words, asking him to love Elena, but what if love meant letting her go to someone who could give her a better life? For the next week, Thomas wrestled with the decision. He asked around town about this Apache woman named Ayana. The stories he heard were remarkable. People spoke of her wisdom, her healing abilities, and her kindness toward all children, regardless of their circumstances. Some said she had raised children who were abandoned or orphaned, giving them skills and confidence that served them well in life. "She sees things differently than most people," explained Carlos, a Mexican trader who had dealings with various Apache bands. "Where others see problems, she sees possibilities. If anyone could help your daughter find her place in this world, it would be Ayana." Thomas spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, imagining what Elena's life might look like. With him, she would always be hidden away, protected but never truly free to be herself. With Ayana, she might have a chance to discover whatever gifts lay hidden beneath her unusual appearance. The decision was tearing him apart, but deep down, Thomas knew what he had to do. On a cool morning in early October, he carefully packed Elena's few belongings into a small bag. He included the only photograph he had of Maria, hoping that someday Elena would want to know about the mother who had loved her so completely. As he lifted Elena into his arms for what might be the last time, Thomas whispered a promise to her. Sleeping form. "I'm not abandoning you, little one. I'm trying to give you the life your mama would have wanted for you. A life where you can shine instead of hide." The journey to find Ayana would take 2 days through dangerous territory, but Thomas was determined to see it through. As he loaded his horse and secured Elena in a padded basket, he tried to convince himself that he was making the right choice. The morning sun painted the desert in shades of gold and red, and for the first time in months, Thomas allowed himself to hope that maybe, somewhere out there, his daughter would find the acceptance and love she deserved. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction as Thomas guided his horse along the narrow trail. Elena slept peacefully in the padded basket secured to his saddle, seemingly unaware that this journey would change both their lives forever. The morning sun was already growing harsh, and Thomas had wrapped extra cloth around the basket to protect his daughter from its rays. 2 days of traveling through Apache territory had Thomas's nerves on edge. Every shadow could hide a warrior, every sound could signal danger, but his desperation outweighed his fear. If this woman Ayana could truly help Elena, then the risk was worth taking. As they crested a small hill, Thomas saw smoke rising from a valley below. His heart hammered as he spotted several wickiups scattered among the mesquite trees. This was it. An Apache settlement? He took a deep breath and urged his horse forward, knowing there was no turning back now. The first Apache he encountered was a young man tending horses near the edge of the camp. The warrior's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of Thomas and the bundle he carried. Within moments, other figures emerged from the dwellings, their expressions unreadable. "I seek Ayana the healer," Thomas called out, his voice cracking. "Slightly. I come in peace. I need her wisdom." An older warrior stepped forward, his weathered face studying Thomas carefully. "Why does the white man seek our medicine woman? What do you carry?" Thomas's hands shook as he began to unwrap Elena's basket. "My daughter. She is different. I was told Ayana might understand her needs better than I do." When Elena was revealed, sleeping peacefully despite the commotion around her, the Apache people fell silent. Her pale skin seemed to glow against the dark cloth, and her white hair caught the sunlight like spun silver. Several of the women moved closer, their eyes widening with what Thomas couldn't tell was fear or wonder. "Bring him to Ayana, the older warrior finally said. "She will want to see this child." They led Thomas through the camp, and he noticed how the people watched them pass. Unlike the townspeople back home who crossed themselves or looked away, these Apache faces showed curiosity and something else he couldn't identify. It almost looked like respect. Ayana's dwelling sat at the heart of the settlement, marked by bundles of herbs hanging from the entrance and smooth stones arranged in careful patterns around the base. When they approached, a voice called from within in accented English, "Bring the white father and his moonchild to me." Thomas's breath caught. How could she already know what Elena looked like? He ducked through the entrance and found himself in a space that felt more like a sanctuary than a simple home. The air smelled of sage and cedar, and soft light filtered through the hide walls. Sitting cross-legged on a woven mat was a woman whose age was impossible to guess. Her hair, streaked with silver, hung in 2 long braids, and her dark eyes held a depth that seemed to see right through him. "I am Ayana," she said simply. "Show me the child." With trembling hands, Thomas carefully lifted Elena from her basket. The baby stirred and opened her pale blue eyes, looking directly at Ayana without the crying that usually accompanied meeting strangers. Ayana's face transformed as she gazed at Elena. A slow smile spread across her features, and she extended her arms. "May I?" Thomas hesitated for just a moment before placing his daughter in the medicine woman's gentle hands. Ayana held Elena up to the light filtering through the dwelling's walls, examining her carefully but tenderly. "In the old stories," Ayana said softly, "children born with the color of moonlight were considered sacred messengers. They were believed to carry special sight, to see things others could not." She looked directly at Thomas. "You fear she is cursed, but I see a child touched by the spirits." "I don't know how to care for her," Thomas admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Her mother died, and I'm failing her every day. She can't be in the sun. People are afraid of her, and I don't know what she needs." Ayana nodded slowly, her attention returning to Elena, who was reaching up to touch the feathers hanging from the medicine woman's necklace. "The child knows no fear because she has not yet learned to see herself as different. That is good. Fear would dim her inner light. Dr. Martinez said you might be able to help her. That you understand children like Elena?" "I have raised children that others called cursed or strange," Ayana replied. "A boy who could not speak but could communicate with animals. A girl who saw visions that always came true. A child born with a withered arm who became our finest storyteller." She paused, studying Elena's face. Each was a gift wrapped in an unusual package. Most people only see the wrapping. Thomas felt tears stinging his eyes. I love her, but I'm not enough. I promised my wife I would love her, but maybe loving her means letting someone else raise her who can give her what she needs. Ayana was quiet for a long time, gently rocking Elena as the baby played with her necklace. When she finally spoke, her voice was filled with certainty. This child has strong medicine. I can feel it in her spirit. She will need special teaching to understand her gifts and protection while she grows into them. Will you take her? Thomas asked, the words cutting his heart like a knife. If you truly wish it, yes. But understand this, if I raise her, she will become Apache in all ways except blood. She will learn our customs, speak our language, follow our spiritual path. She will belong to our people, not to the white world that rejects her. Thomas thought about Elena's future in his world. Always hidden, always protected, always seen as something to be pitied or feared. Then he imagined her growing up here, where her differences might be valued instead of scorned. Would I ever see her again? Ayana's expression softened. That would depend on many things. On how she grows, what she chooses, how the world changes. I cannot promise you anything except that she will be loved and valued for who she is, not judged for how she looks. Elena made a soft cooing sound and wrapped her tiny fingers around one of Ayana's feathers. The medicine woman laughed, a sound like water flowing over stones. See, she has already chosen. Children always know. Thomas spent the rest of the day in the Apache camp, watching Elena interact with her potential new family. The Apache children were fascinated by her pale skin and light hair, but their curiosity was gentle, full of wonder rather than fear. The women passed her from arm to arm, each one commenting on her bright spirit and peaceful nature. As evening approached, Thomas knew his time for decision-making was running out. He held Elena one last time as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. His daughter looked up at him with those clear, pale eyes, and for a moment he could swear he saw understanding there. I want what's best for you, little one, he whispered, even if it breaks my heart. When he handed Elena to Ayana for the final time, Thomas felt like he was giving away a piece of his soul. But as he watched the medicine woman cradle his daughter against her chest, he also felt something he hadn't experienced since Maria's death: hope. I will call her Paloma Blanca, Ayana said quietly. White dove, she will fly high and free, and her unusual beauty will be celebrated, not hidden. Thomas nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. As he prepared to leave the camp, he wondered if he had just made the greatest sacrifice of his life, or the greatest gift he could give his daughter. 7 years had passed since Thomas left baby Elena in Ayana's care, and the child who had once been hidden from the world was now thriving in ways no one could have imagined. Paloma Blanca, as she was known throughout the Apache community, had grown into a remarkable young girl whose pale skin and silver-white hair had become symbols of respect rather than fear. The morning sun filtered through the wickiup as Paloma stirred from sleep, automatically reaching for the special clothes Ayana had taught her to wear. Unlike the heavy, suffocating coverings her birth father had wrapped her in, these garments were lightweight and breathable, woven with plant fibers that protected her sensitive skin while allowing her to move freely through her daily activities. Good morning, little dove, Ayana called softly from where she was preparing the morning meal. Even after all these years, the medicine woman never failed to greet Paloma with warmth and affection. The clouds are dancing differently today, Paloma said, her pale blue eyes fixed on the sky visible through the smoke hole above. They're moving fast from the west, and they're darker underneath than they appear on top? Ayana smiled knowingly. Over the years, she had watched Paloma develop an uncanny ability to read the sky and predict weather patterns with accuracy that amazed even the most experienced Apache scouts. What had started as simple observations had grown into something much more significant. What do the clouds tell you, child? Paloma tilted her head, concentrating. Rain will come, but not today. maybe tomorrow afternoon, and it will be heavy. When it arrives, the kind that fills the water holes quickly. This gift had first appeared when Paloma was only 4 years old. She had announced to a group of women preparing for a gathering that they should move their celebration indoors because the sky was planning to cry. The women had laughed gently at the child's imagination as the day was perfectly clear. 2 hours later, an unexpected thunderstorm had soaked the area so thoroughly that the celebration would have been ruined if they hadn't listened to her warning. Since then, Paloma's weather predictions had become legendary throughout the region. Hunting parties consulted her before long journeys. Farmers asked about the best times to plant. Trading expeditions sought her advice about when to travel and when to take shelter. "Come," Ayana said, gathering herbs and supplies into a woven basket. "Today we visit the Ramirez family. Their youngest son has been coughing for 3 days, and they've asked for our help." Paloma nodded eagerly. She loved accompanying Ayana on healing visits, not just because she enjoyed helping people, but because these journeys had taught her about the wider world beyond their camp. The Apache community had connections with Mexican families, peaceful white settlers, and even some townspeople who had learned to value Ayana's wisdom over their prejudices as they walked through the settlement. Other children called out greetings to Paloma. She had never experienced the isolation and rejection that might have shaped her life in the white world. Here, her appearance was simply part of who she was, no more remarkable than having brown eyes or black hair. "Paloma," called Nalmish, a boy her own age who had become her closest friend. "Are you going to the healing visit? Can you check the sky for our hunting trip tomorrow?" Paloma paused and looked upward again, her pale eyes scanning the horizon with the intensity of someone reading a fascinating book. "Tomorrow morning will be perfect for hunting. Clear skies until late afternoon, then clouds but no rain. The animals will be moving to water sources as the day warms." Nalnish grinned and ran off to share the news with his father and uncles. Paloma continued walking with Ayana, but she noticed the medicine woman watching her with a thoughtful expression. "What? Is it grandmother?" Paloma asked, using the Apache term of respect she had learned to call Ayana. "I have been thinking about your gift, child. It grows stronger each year, but I wonder if there is more to it than just reading weather." "What do you mean?" Ayana stopped walking and knelt down to Paloma's level. "Yesterday when you warned the horse traders about the sandstorm that was coming from the east, how did you know?" "There were no clouds in that direction." Paloma frowned, trying to put her feelings into words. "I don't just see the weather with my eyes. It's like like I can feel it in my body. The air gets heavy in a certain way before rain. My skin tingles when wind is changing direction. And sometimes I dream about storms before they happen." "Dreams?" "Last week I dreamed about water rushing down the canyon near the old trading post. 3 days later the flash flood happened exactly like I saw. It..." Paloma looked worried. "Is that strange? Am I different in a bad way?" Ayana's face filled with pride and tenderness. "Child, among our people, those who can see into the future through dreams are considered blessed by the spirits. You are not. Strange, you are special in the most wonderful way possible." The healing visit to the Ramirez family went smoothly. While Ayana prepared medicines for the sick boy, Paloma sat quietly in the corner, observing everything. She had learned to speak Spanish fluently during these visits, adding it to her knowledge of English and Apache. Languages came easily to her, another gift that Ayana encouraged. "Señora Ayana," Mrs. Ramirez said as they prepared to leave, "please thank Paloma for us. Last month, when she warned us about the hailstorm, we were able to protect our crops. We would have lost everything." On the walk home, Ayana shared stories about other people throughout history who had possessed gifts like Paloma's. There was a woman among the Navajo who could predict where water could be found during droughts. A Mexican man who could sense when earthquakes were coming days before they happened. These gifts usually appear in people who are already different, in some visible way, as if the spirits mark them so others will recognize their special abilities. "But what am I supposed to do with this gift?" Paloma asked. "What's my purpose?" That will reveal itself in time, Ayana replied. For now, you must continue to learn and grow. Study the sky, listen to your dreams, and most importantly, practice using your abilities to help others. That evening, as the sun set over the desert, Paloma sat outside their dwelling with a group of other children, all of them listening to one of the elders tell traditional stories. But while the others focused on the storyteller's words, Paloma found her attention drawn to the horizon. Something was changing in the distance. She could feel it in the way the wind moved, in the color of the clouds gathering far to the south. This wasn't just weather she was sensing. This felt bigger, more important somehow. Grandmother, she whispered to Ayana after the storytelling ended, I think something big is coming. Not just a storm, but something that will change things for all of us. Ayana studied her young charge's face carefully. Over the years, she had learned to trust Paloma's instincts completely. How long do we have? I'm not sure. Maybe weeks, maybe a month. But it's coming. Paloma looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and I think it has something to do with my old life, the life before I came here. Unknown to Paloma, hundreds of miles away, her birth father Thomas was hearing stories about a remarkable young weather prophet among the Apache people. Stories that described a pale-skinned girl with an uncanny ability to predict storms and guide people to safety during the worst drought the territory had seen in decades. As Paloma settled into sleep that night, she dreamed of a man on horseback riding toward their camp, his face weathered by years of regret and longing. In her dreams, she saw herself standing at a crossroads, forced to choose between the world that had raised her and the world that had given her life, the gift that had made her valuable to her. Adopted people was about to become the bridge that connected her past and present in ways she never could have imagined. The first signs of the drought came in early spring, when the winter rains that should have filled the streams never arrived. Paloma Blanca felt it in her bones weeks before anyone else noticed the warning signs. The air tasted different, dry, and hollow like breathing through old leather. Her dreams filled with images of cracked earth and empty water holes. The rain spirits are sleeping too deeply this year, she told Ayana one morning as they watched the sunrise paint the desert in shades of orange and gold. I've been calling to them in my dreams, but they don't answer. Ayana studied the cloudless sky with concern. At 11 years old, Paloma had never been wrong about weather patterns, and her predictions had saved countless lives over the years. If she said the rains wouldn't come, then the Apache people needed to prepare for the worst drought in living memory. How long? Ayana asked simply. Paloma closed her pale eyes and seemed to reach out with senses that others couldn't understand. Many months, maybe until the next winter. The earth will crack like broken pottery, and the animals will travel far searching for water. Word of Paloma's prediction spread quickly through the Apache settlement. Within days, the entire community had shifted into drought preparation mode. Families began rationing their stored water more carefully. Hunting parties ranged farther from camp, seeking game that hadn't yet been forced to migrate. The elders consulted maps drawn on hide, marking every known water source within 100 miles. As weeks passed without a single cloud in the sky, Paloma's reputation spread far beyond their own people. Mexican farmers arrived at the camp asking the Niña de los Cielos, the Sky Child, when they should plant their crops. White settlers who had once avoided Apache territory now sought out Ayana's camp, desperate for any guidance that might help them survive the growing crisis. Please, begged Mr. Henderson, a homesteader from the eastern settlements, my cattle are dying and my well is almost dry. Can your daughter tell us where to find water? Paloma had grown accustomed to being called Ayana's daughter by outsiders, though she knew the truth of her origins. She studied Mr. Henderson's weathered face and saw the same desperation she remembered glimpsing in her birth father's eyes years ago. There's an underground stream that runs beneath the red rocks, 3 miles south of the old cottonwood grove, she said quietly. If you dig where the ground stays slightly green even in this heat, you'll find water about 15 feet down. How can you possibly know that? Henderson asked, amazement and skepticism warring in his voice. "I can feel where the water runs, even when it's hidden," Paloma replied. "It's like hearing a song that only plays underground." Henderson followed her directions and found exactly what she had promised. Within a week, news of the discovery had spread throughout the territory. People began calling her the Water Witch, though those who met her in person quickly realized there was nothing frightening about the pale, soft-spoken girl who seemed to carry the wisdom of the desert in her unusual eyes. The drought deepened. As summer arrived with merciless intensity, the sun blazed down like an angry spirit, turning the landscape into a furnace that tested every living thing's will to survive. Rivers that had flowed for generations became chains of isolated pools, then mere damp spots in cracked mud. Then nothing at all. Paloma found herself busier than ever, guiding desperate people to hidden water sources that she could sense through her mysterious connection to the land. Some sources were springs tucked into hidden canyons. Others were seasonal streams that still held water in deep pockets. A few were underground rivers that could be reached by digging in precisely the right spots. "I don't understand how she does it," whispered Mrs. Garcia, a Mexican woman whose family had been saved when Paloma directed them to a spring that had sustained them for weeks. "It's like she can see through the earth itself." But the constant use of her gift was taking its toll on Paloma. Each time she reached out with her special senses to locate water, she felt a piece of her energy drain away. Dark circles appeared under her pale eyes, and Ayana worried that the young girl was pushing herself too hard. "You must rest," the medicine woman insisted one evening after Paloma had guided 3 different groups to water sources. "Your gift is strong, but you are still human. Even the strongest well can run dry if too much is drawn from it too quickly." "I can't rest while people are suffering," Paloma replied, though exhaustion made her voice weak. "Every day I wait, more animals die, more crops fail, more families lose hope." That night, Paloma's dreams were more vivid than ever. She saw the drought spreading across the entire territory like a living thing, consuming everything in its path. She witnessed Apache families forced to abandon their traditional lands in search of water. She watched Mexican villages empty as people fled to distant relatives in greener regions. She saw white settlements turning into ghost towns as wells failed and crops withered. But in her dream, she also saw something else. A massive storm system building far to the south over the mountains of Mexico. It was still weeks away, maybe even months, but it was coming. The question was whether anyone would survive long enough to benefit from the eventual relief. When she woke, Paloma knew what she had to do. She found Ayana preparing herbs for the morning meal and sat down beside her adoptive mother with unusual solemnity. "I need to travel," Paloma said. "There are people in places I've never been who need to know where to find water. If I don't help them, they'll die before the rains finally come." Ayana's face filled with concern. "Child, you're exhausted already. How can you possibly take on more?" "Because this is why I was given this gift," Paloma replied with a certainty that surprised them both. "Maybe this is why I was born different, why I ended up here with you, why I can do things other people can't. Maybe this drought is the reason for everything that happened to me." Over the following weeks, Paloma embarked on the most challenging period of her young life. Accompanied by Apache warriors who ensured her safety, she traveled throughout the territory, seeking out communities in desperate need. Her pale skin, usually protected so carefully from the sun, now bore the evidence of her journeys. Despite the special clothing and careful precautions, she guided a lost wagon train to a hidden oasis that saved 37 people from certain death. She helped a Apache band locate a series of underground springs that allowed them to remain in their ancestral lands, instead of joining the growing exodus of climate refugees. She showed Mexican farmers how to dig for water in places where the earth itself seemed to whisper its secrets to her alone. Word of the Angel de la Sequía, the angel of the drought, spread faster than wildfire across the territory. Stories grew with each telling, but those who actually met Paloma found something more profound than the legends suggested. They found a young girl who combined mystical abilities with genuine compassion. Someone who risked her own health repeatedly to help strangers survive the crisis. But as Paloma's reputation grew, so did the attention she attracted from people who had once been part of her life. In settlements and trading posts throughout the region, men gathered around campfires to share stories about the remarkable weather prophet. Among those listeners was a trader named Thomas Whitman, whose weathered face went pale when he heard descriptions of the girl's unusual appearance and extraordinary abilities. After 7 years of wondering what had become of his daughter, Thomas finally knew where to find her. The question that haunted him now was whether the daughter he had given away would welcome the father who had abandoned her, and whether he had any right to re-enter her life just when she was discovering her true purpose in the world. Thomas Whitman had been riding for 3 days straight, following stories and rumors that grew more detailed with each mile. His horse was exhausted, his water nearly gone, but he pressed on through the drought-stricken landscape with a determination born of 7 years of regret. Each person he met confirmed what he barely dared to believe. The legendary weather prophet was his daughter, the child he had given away in desperation. The trading post where he stopped to rest buzzed with conversation about the miraculous girl who could find water in the driest places. Thomas sat in the corner, listening to every word while his heart hammered against his ribs. "Saw her myself just last week," said a grizzled prospector, nursing a cup of weak coffee. "Pale as moonlight, hair white as fresh snow, but those eyes, they see things the rest of us can't. Led our whole party to a spring hidden in rocks where no spring had any right to be. My cousin's family would be dead without her," added a Mexican woman. "She told them exactly where to dig for water down to the foot. Saved 14 people, including 3 babies. Thomas's hands shook as he sipped his own coffee. The child these people described bore no resemblance to the helpless infant he remembered. This was someone who had found her place in the world, who was using her differences to help others instead of hiding from them. He wondered if he had any right to disrupt the life she had built, but the drought that had made his daughter famous had also destroyed everything Thomas had worked for. His trading business had collapsed as settlements emptied and customers fled to greener lands. His house sat abandoned, too expensive to maintain without income. At 53 years old, he had lost everything except the desperate need to see his daughter again. As he approached the Apache territory, Thomas's nervousness grew with each mile. These were the same people he had once feared and misunderstood. Now they had raised his daughter, given her opportunities he never could have provided. What if they saw him as a threat? What if Paloma herself rejected him? The Apache scouts found him while he was still 2 miles from their main camp. Thomas raised his hands immediately, showing he carried no weapons. "I seek Ayana the medicine." "Woman," he called out, "I need to speak with the girl called Paloma Blanca." The warriors exchanged glances. One of them, a young man with intelligent eyes, rode closer. "Why does the white trader seek our water finder?" Thomas took a deep breath. "Because she is my daughter." The words hung in the desert air like a challenge. The warriors' expressions didn't change, but Thomas sensed a shift in their attention. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the young warrior nodded. "Follow, but know this, she belongs to our people now. If you bring her pain, you will answer to all of us." The ride to the camp felt endless. Thomas's mind raced with everything he wanted to say, every apology he had rehearsed during sleepless nights over the past 7 years. But when he finally saw the settlement spread out before him, his prepared words evaporated. Paloma was sitting beside a fire in the center of the camp, surrounded by children listening to her tell a story. Even from a distance, Thomas could see how she had grown. She was tall for her age, graceful in her movements, and completely at ease among the Apache people. Her pale skin and silver hair made her stand out like a star against the desert landscape. But here it was clearly a mark of distinction rather than shame. As he approached, Paloma looked up. Their eyes met across the camp, and Thomas felt the world stop moving. Those pale blue eyes that had once seemed so alien to him now held depths of wisdom and compassion that took his breath away. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Paloma stood slowly, her expression unreadable. The children around her fell silent, sensing the importance of the moment. Other Apache people began emerging from their dwellings, forming a protective circle around their adopted daughter. "I know you," Paloma said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the desert air. "You're the man from my early memories. The one who held me but couldn't look at me." Thomas felt tears burning his eyes. "I'm your father," he said, his voice cracking. "Your birth father, anyway. I came to see what you've become." "Why now?" There was no anger in her voice, just genuine curiosity. "After all these years, why come now?" "Because I heard the stories," Thomas replied honestly. "Stories about a girl who saves lives, who helps people survive when everything seems hopeless. I heard about your gift, your wisdom, your kindness, and I realized I gave away the most precious thing in my life because I was too frightened and ignorant to see what you truly were." Ayana stepped forward from the crowd that had gathered. Her weathered face showed no hostility, but her protective stance made her feelings clear. Paloma has grown into exactly who she was meant to be. She doesn't need rescue from a life that values her. "I'm not here to rescue her," Thomas said, looking directly at the medicine woman who had given his daughter everything he couldn't. "I'm here to apologize, to her and to you. You saw what I was too blind to see. You gave her the love and understanding she deserved." Paloma stepped closer, studying his face with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "You look older, sadder. The drought took everything from you too, didn't it?" Thomas nodded, amazed by her perceptiveness. "Everything except regret. I've spent 7 years wondering if you were happy, if you were safe, if you ever thought about me. I never stopped loving you, Elena, even when I was too afraid to show it properly." "My name is Paloma Blanca now," she said gently. "White Dove, but I remember the name Elena too. Sometimes in dreams." The tension in the camp was palpable. Thomas could feel dozens of eyes watching this reunion, ready to intervene if needed. These people had become Paloma's family, and they would protect her from any threat, including him. "I don't expect forgiveness," Thomas continued. "I don't expect anything at all. I just needed you to know that giving you up was the biggest mistake of my life, but also the most loving thing I ever did. You've become someone remarkable, someone who makes the world better just by being in it. Your mother would be so proud." At the mention of Maria, Paloma's composed expression flickered. "Tell me about her," she said. "About my birth mother. I have her picture, but I want to know who she was." Thomas spent the next hour sitting by the fire, sharing stories about Maria while Paloma listened intently. He told her about Maria's gentle spirit, her fierce love for her unborn child, her certainty that Elena would be special. As he spoke, some of the tension in the camp began to ease. "She used to sing to you before you were born," Thomas said. "Mexican lullabies that her own mother had sung to her. She believed you could hear them and that they would comfort you." "Sometimes I dream of singing," Paloma said softly. "Songs I don't remember learning, maybe they were her songs." When the sun began to set, painting the desert in brilliant colors, Thomas knew his time was running short. He couldn't stay in the Apache camp indefinitely, and he sensed that Paloma needed time to process their reunion. "I don't know what happens now," he admitted. "I don't know if there's a place for me in your life, or if I even deserve one. But I want you to know that I'm proud of who you've become. More proud than I have any right to be." Paloma was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. When she finally spoke, her words surprised everyone. "The big rains are coming soon," she said. "In maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3. When they arrive, everything will change again. People will return to places they abandoned. New opportunities will grow where the water flows." She looked directly at Thomas. "Maybe you should stay until then. Maybe we both need time to understand what this reunion means." Thomas felt hope stirring in his chest for the first time in years. "If your people will allow it, I would be grateful for that time." Ayana studied both of them carefully, then nodded. Slowly, the child speaks wisdom. "Stay, Thomas Whitman. Help us prepare for the rains your daughter promises. Perhaps it's time for healing between all the different parts of her story." As the camp settled in for the night, Thomas lay on a borrowed blanket and stared up at the star-filled sky. For the first time since Maria's death, he felt like he might have a future worth living. His daughter had grown into someone extraordinary, and somehow, miraculously, she was willing to give him a chance to be part of her life again. Thomas Whitman had been writing for 3 days straight, following stories and rumors that grew more detailed with each mile. His horse was exhausted, his water nearly gone, but he pressed on through the drought-stricken landscape with a determination born of 7 years of regret. Each person he met confirmed what he barely dared to believe. The legendary weather prophet was his daughter, the child he had given away in desperation. The trading post where he stopped to rest buzzed with conversation about the miraculous girl who could find water in the driest places. Thomas sat in the corner, listening to every word while his heart hammered against his ribs. "Saw her myself just last week," said a grizzled prospector, nursing a cup of weak coffee. "Pale as moonlight, hair white as fresh snow, but those eyes, they see things the rest of us can't. Led our whole party to a spring hidden in rocks where no spring had any right to be. My cousin's family would be dead without her," added a Mexican woman. "She told them exactly where to dig for water down to the foot, saved 14 people, including 3 babies. Thomas's hands shook as he sipped his own coffee. The child these people described bore no resemblance to the helpless infant he remembered. This was someone who had found her place in the world, who was using her differences to help others instead of hiding from them. He wondered if he had any right to disrupt the life she had built, but the drought that had made his daughter famous had also destroyed everything Thomas had worked for. His trading business had collapsed as settlements emptied and customers fled to greener lands. His house sat abandoned, too expensive to maintain without income. At 53 years old, he had lost everything except the desperate need to see his daughter again. As he approached the Apache territory, Thomas's nervousness grew with each mile. These were the same people he had once feared and misunderstood. Now they had raised his daughter, given her opportunities he never could have provided. What if they saw him as a threat? What if Paloma herself rejected him? The Apache scouts found him while he was still 2 miles from their main camp. Thomas raised his hands immediately, showing he carried no weapons. "I seek Ayana the medicine." "Woman," he called out, "I need to speak with the girl called Paloma Blanca." The warriors exchanged glances. One of them, a young man with intelligent eyes, rode closer. "Why does the white trader seek our water finder?" Thomas took a deep breath. "Because she is my daughter." The words hung in the desert air like a challenge. The warriors' expressions didn't change, but Thomas sensed a shift in their attention. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the young warrior nodded. "Follow, but know this, she belongs to our people now. If you bring her pain, you will answer to all of us." The ride to the camp felt endless. Thomas's mind raced with everything he wanted to say, every apology he had rehearsed during sleepless nights over the past 7 years. But when he finally saw the settlement spread out before him, his prepared words evaporated. Paloma was sitting beside a fire in the center of the camp, surrounded by children listening to her tell a story. Even from a distance, Thomas could see how she had grown. She was tall for her age, graceful in her movements, and completely at ease among the Apache people. Her pale skin and silver hair made her stand out like a star against the desert landscape. But here it was clearly a mark of distinction rather than shame. As he approached, Paloma looked up. Their eyes met across the camp, and Thomas felt the world stop moving. Those pale blue eyes that had once seemed so alien to him now held depths of wisdom and compassion that took his breath away. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Paloma stood slowly, her expression unreadable. The children around her fell silent, sensing the importance of the moment. Other Apache people began emerging from their dwellings, forming a protective circle around their adopted daughter. "I know you," Paloma said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the desert air. "You're the man from my early memories. The one who held me but couldn't look at me." Thomas felt tears burning his eyes. "I'm your father," he said, his voice cracking. "Your birth father, anyway. I came to see what you've become. Why now? There was no anger in her voice, just genuine curiosity. After all these years, why come now? Because I heard the stories, Thomas replied honestly. Stories about a girl who saves lives, who helps people survive when everything seems hopeless. I heard about your gift, your wisdom, your kindness, and I realized I gave away the most precious thing in my life because I was too frightened and ignorant to see what you truly were. Ayanna stepped forward from the crowd that had gathered. Her weathered face showed no hostility, but her protective stance made her feelings clear. Paloma has grown into exactly who she was meant to be. She doesn't need rescue from a life that values her. I'm not here to rescue her, Thomas said, looking directly at the medicine woman who had given his daughter everything he couldn't. I'm here to apologize to her and to you. You saw what I was too blind to see. You gave her the love and understanding she deserved. Paloma stepped closer, studying his face with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. You look older, sadder. The drought took everything from you too, didn't it? Thomas nodded, amazed by her perceptiveness. Everything except regret. I've spent 7 years wondering if you were happy, if you were safe, if you ever thought about me. I never stopped loving you, Elena, even when I was too afraid to show it properly. My name is Paloma Blanca now, she said gently. White dove, but I remember the name Elena too. Sometimes in dreams. The tension in the camp was palpable. Thomas could feel dozens of eyes watching this reunion, ready to intervene if needed. These people had become Paloma's family, and they would protect her from any threat, including him. I don't expect forgiveness, Thomas continued. I don't expect anything at all. I just needed you to know that giving you up was the biggest mistake of my life, but also the most loving thing I ever did. You've become someone remarkable, someone who makes the world better just by being in it. Your mother would be so proud. At the mention of Maria, Paloma's composed expression flickered. Tell me about her, she said. About my birth mother. I have her picture, but I want to know who she was. Thomas spent the next hour sitting by the fire, sharing stories about Maria while Paloma listened intently. He told her about Maria's gentle spirit, her fierce love for her unborn child, her certainty that Elena would be special. As he spoke, some of the tension in the camp began to ease. She used to sing to you before you were born, Thomas said. Mexican lullabies that her own mother had sung to her. She believed you could hear them and that they would comfort you. Sometimes I dream of singing, Paloma said softly. Songs I don't remember learning, maybe they were her songs. When the sun began to set, painting the desert in brilliant colors, Thomas knew his time was running short. He couldn't stay in the Apache camp indefinitely, and he sensed that Paloma needed time to process their reunion. I don't know what happens now, he admitted. I don't know if there's a place for me in your life or if I even deserve one. But I want you to know that I'm proud of who you've become. More proud than I have any right to be. Paloma was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. When she finally spoke, her words surprised everyone. The big rains are coming soon, she said. In maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3. When they arrive, everything will change again. People will return to places they abandoned. New opportunities will grow where the water flows. She looked directly at Thomas. Maybe you should stay until then. Maybe we both need time to understand what this reunion means. Thomas felt hope stirring in his chest for the first time in years. If your people will allow it, I would be grateful for that time. Ayanna studied both of them carefully, then nodded. Slowly, the child speaks wisdom. Stay, Thomas Whitman. Help us prepare for the rains your daughter promises. Perhaps it's time for healing between all the different parts of her story. As the camp settled in for the night, Thomas lay on a borrowed blanket and stared up at the star-filled sky. For the first time since Maria's death, he felt like he might have a future worth living. His daughter had grown into someone extraordinary, and somehow, miraculously, she was willing to give him a chance to be part of her life again. 5 years had passed since the great rains ended the drought, and Paloma Blanca had grown into a young woman whose reputation stretched across the entire Arizona territory. At 17, she stood tall and graceful, her silver-white hair now long enough to braid with the traditional Apache feathers and beads that marked her status as a respected member of the community. Her pale skin, once hidden from the world in shame, now caught the desert sunlight like polished pearl as she moved confidently between the different worlds she had learned to bridge. The small Apache settlement where she had grown up had transformed into something unprecedented, a gathering place where people from all backgrounds came seeking wisdom, mediation, and guidance. What had started as a traditional camp now included structures built in Mexican, Apache, and American styles, representing the communities that Paloma had helped bring together over the years. Thomas Whitman, now 58 and grayer but stronger in spirit than he had been in decades, worked alongside Apache craftsmen to finish the latest addition to the settlement, a large meeting hall where representatives from different communities could gather to discuss shared concerns. His hands, once soft from indoor trading work, were now calloused from honest labor and marked with small scars from learning to work with stone and wood. "The foundation needs to be deeper on the eastern side," Paloma called out as she approached the construction site. "The spring rains next month will be heavier than usual, and the water will pool there if we don't prepare properly." The workers immediately adjusted their plans based on her weather prediction. Over the years, no one had learned to question Paloma's forecasts. Her accuracy remained perfect, and her ability to sense weather patterns had only grown stronger. With time, Ayana emerged from the main dwelling, her hair now completely silver but her steps still sure and purposeful. At 73, the medicine woman remained Paloma's closest advisor and the anchor that kept the growing settlement grounded in Apache traditions, even as it evolved to accommodate visitors from many cultures. "The delegation from Santa Fe has arrived," Ayana announced. "They're requesting your help with the mining dispute near the Sangre de Cristo Mountains." Paloma nodded, brushing dust from her clothing. This would be her most challenging mediation yet. The territorial government was finally recognizing her unique position as someone trusted by all communities, and they had begun officially requesting her assistance with conflicts that threatened to escalate into violence. The Santa Fe delegation included the territorial governor himself, a man named Governor Wallace, who had traveled 5 days to seek Paloma's counsel. When she entered the meeting hall, followed by Thomas and Ayana, Wallace rose respectfully. The sight of a 17-year-old girl commanding such respect from powerful officials never failed to amaze those who witnessed it for the first time. "Miss Paloma," Governor Wallace said formally, "we need your help to prevent what could become a war between 3 different groups, all claiming rights to the same silver deposits." Paloma took her seat at the head of the large wooden table that Thomas had crafted specifically for these negotiations. Around the table sat representatives from a mining company backed by Eastern investors, leaders from 2 different Apache bands whose ancestral lands included the disputed area, and Mexican landowners whose families had held grants to the territory for generations. "Tell me about the silver," Paloma said simply. The mining company representative, a well-dressed man named Collins, spread maps across the table. "Our geological surveys indicate one of the richest silver deposits ever discovered in the territory. The potential value could fund schools, hospitals, and infrastructure improvements that would benefit everyone in the region." Chief Walking Eagle, representing one of the Apache bands, shook his head grimly. "The mountain where this silver lies contains the burial grounds of our ancestors. To dig there would disturb the spirits and bring misfortune to all who participate. My family has grazed cattle in those valleys for 3 generations, added Senor Morales, the Mexican landowner. "We have legal documents proving our claim to the grazing rights, signed by officials in Mexico City before this became American territory." Paloma listened carefully to each argument, her pale eyes moving thoughtfully from speaker to speaker. But instead of immediately proposing solutions, she asked a question that surprised everyone. "What will happen to the water?" "The water?" Collins looked confused. "What does water have to do with silver mining?" "Mining operations use enormous amounts of water," Paloma explained patiently. "They also produce waste that can poison streams and underground sources. That mountain feeds the springs that supply water to settlements for 50 miles in every direction. She stood and moved to the maps, her finger tracing the path of waterways that flowed from the disputed mountain. If you contaminate the water, sources here, it will affect the Apache hunting grounds to the north, the Mexican farming communities to the south, and the white settlements to the east. You're not just arguing about silver. You're arguing about the future of water for thousands of people. The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Thomas watched his daughter with growing admiration as she transformed what had seemed like an impossible conflict into a clearer problem with potential solutions. What do you propose? Governor Wallace asked. Paloma returned to her seat and closed her eyes for a moment, the way she always did when reaching out with her special senses to understand the natural forces at work. When she opened them again, her expression was confident. The silver can be extracted, but only with new methods that protect the water. Chief Walking Eagle, your people have knowledge of which areas of the mountain are most sacred and must not be disturbed. Senator Morales, your grazing lands can actually be improved if the mining operation includes water management systems that benefit your cattle. And Mr. Collins, your investors can make their profits while also funding the water protection measures. That will make this operation sustainable. Over the next 3 days, Paloma guided the negotiation with a combination of practical wisdom and almost mystical insight into the land itself. She showed them how to design mining operations that worked around sacred sites. She explained how proper water management could actually increase the carrying capacity of the grazing lands. She demonstrated how environmental protection could become a selling point that attracted responsible investors rather than driving them away. The child speaks sense, Chief Walking Eagle admitted after reviewing her detailed proposals. If the mining can be done without disturbing our ancestors and while protecting the water, then perhaps profit and respect can coexist. The final agreement was unlike anything anyone had seen before. The mining company would employ Apache guides to ensure sacred sites remained untouched. Mexican landowners would receive compensation not just for land use but for participating in water conservation efforts. A percentage of mining profits would fund a scholarship program that sent young people from all 3 communities to Eastern schools to learn new technologies and bring that knowledge back to the territory. Most importantly, Paloma herself would oversee the environmental monitoring, using her weather prediction abilities and deep understanding of water systems to ensure the operations remained sustainable. How did you learn to do this? Governor Wallace asked as the agreement was being signed. How did you become so wise so young? Paloma smiled, glancing at Ayana and Thomas. I learned from people who saw my differences as gifts instead of problems. I learned that when you bring different types of knowledge together, Apache understanding of the land, Mexican agricultural wisdom, American technology, and whatever special insights I might have, you can solve problems that seem impossible when people work alone. That evening, as the various delegations prepared to return to their communities, Thomas and Paloma walked together to the hilltop where they often went to watch the sunset. The desert spread out below them, green and alive from the previous year's rains, dotted with settlements where people from different backgrounds were learning to live and work together. I've been thinking about your mother a lot lately, Thomas said. About the last thing she asked me to do? What was that? She asked me to love you. At the time, I thought I knew what love meant. I thought it meant keeping you safe, protecting you from anything that might hurt you. Thomas paused, watching. The sky turned brilliant orange and purple. But watching you these past few years, I've learned that real love sometimes means letting someone become who they're meant to be, even if it's different from what you expected. Paloma reached over and took his weathered hand in her own. You did love me even when you gave me away. You loved me enough to find someone who could see what you couldn't see yet. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Paloma could feel new changes coming on the wind. The territory was growing and changing. More people were arriving from the east. New challenges would arise that would test everything she had. Learned about bringing different communities together, but she was ready. The pale, unusual child who had once been seen as cursed had grown into a bridge between worlds. And with each person she helped, each conflict she resolved,